Hello, my name is Jon LarMarque, and I'm the student pastor at Coosada Baptist Church. It's outside Prattville. And I just want to say before we begin that I've watched all the content that is available on this site. And I just want to encourage you to take advantage of that. Watch the videos, put them into practice. I know most of those guys personally, and they're doing what they're teaching. And because all this content is so solid, I want to take a different approach in my webinar. For the next few minutes, I would like to talk about reaching the next generation through your teaching. But I want to give you more inspiration than information, but I believe it'll lead to transformation of how you teach and how you do ministry. In order to do that, I want to start in Judges chapter 2. So if you have your Bible, you can turn there. We're going to be in verse 6 of chapter 2. And this is what it says. Previously, when Joshua had sent the people away, the Israelites had gone to take possession of the land, each to his own inheritance. The people worshiped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and during the lifetimes of the elders who outlived Joshua. They had seen all the Lord's great works he had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. They buried him in the territory of the inheritance. Now skipping ahead, notice this sentence. That whole generation was also gathered to their ancestors. After them, another generation arose who did not know the Lord or the works that he had done for Israel. Can I say that again? After them, another generation rose up who did not know the Lord or the works that he had done for Israel. The Israelites did what was evil in his sight. They worshiped the Baals, abandoning the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed other gods from the surrounding peoples and bowed down to them. They angered the Lord. So what are we reading here in this passage? You see, when Joshua led Israel, the people were faithful. They obeyed God's commands. They took possession of the promised land, driving out the nations before them. They claimed the inheritance that God had promised. They worshiped the Lord wholeheartedly. And during Joshua's lifetime, they witnessed God's power, his miracles, his victories, his presence. But then Joshua died. He wasn't there to lead, to remind, to point them back to God. And something tragic happened. Verse 10, a new generation rose who did not know the Lord. They didn't know what he had done. They abandoned him, chased after other gods. They did what was evil in his sight. Joshua had been a strong, faithful leader. He showed Israel the greatness of God, led them into the promises of God. But once he was gone, the people drifted. They forgot what he had told them. Amnesia led to abandonment. Forgetfulness led to forsakenness. In just one generation, Israel went from a people who watched the walls of Jericho crumble by God's power to a people who didn't know God at all. That's how quick it can happen. Now, student ministry leaders, verse 10 should be fuel for everything we do. It should drive our churches, our ministries. It should shape our priorities. It should compel us to invest deeply into the next generation. Because here's the truth. I don't want the next generation to walk away from the Lord. In fact, I want them to ignite a revival. And I've given my life to that mission, and over the next few minutes, I want to persuade you to give yourself to it as well. So the question that I want us to answer, will you reach the next generation? And to do that, we must avoid becoming the story of Judges. But if we're honest, we look around, sometimes it seems like we're repeating the same mistake today. Think about this. In our culture, religious affiliation continues to decline. Pew's Religious Landscape Study shows that the number of religiously unaffiliated adults, which is called nuns, is steadily rising. Last year, about 29% of U.S. adults identified as nuns, which includes atheists, agnostics, and people who claim nothing in particular. This trend is even more pronounced among young people. Around 43% of 18 to 29-year-olds identify as nuns. Generation Z, born between 1998 and 2012, these are your high school students in your ministries. They've often been described by Barna as the first truly post-Christian generation. The percentage of Generation Z that identifies as atheist is double that of the U.S. overall adult population. Some suggest that that might be the highest figure of any generation ever. The Wall Street Journal reported that less than 30% of Gen Z teens say religion is important to them. Only 30%. And only 4% claim to have a biblical worldview. In many ways, they are considered the least religious generation to date. And now another generation is entering into our student ministries, Generation Alpha. And so the question becomes, how can we prevent what happened in the book of Judges from happening in our day? Even though the current cultural trajectory seems headed in that direction. How do we reach the next generation? Today in our time together, I want to share 5 points from a book called The Not So Secret Secret to Reaching the Next Generation. It's by Kevin DeYoung, and the content is solid, and I want to share that to you today. And the question that we're going to answer is how? How will we reach the next generation? And we'll see 5 points. The first one is this: win them with love. Win them with love. Jesus says in John 13, I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Now notice, Jesus did not say they will know you're my disciples by how trendy you are. He didn't say they will know you're my disciples by the cool atmosphere you create in your youth group. He didn't even say they will know it by how well you teach and preach. He said that they will know you are my disciples by your love, how you love. So if it's our desire to reach the next generation, we have to love. In our desire to love the next generation, maybe it's time we stop trying so hard to be innovative, relevant, and flashy, and start trying to truly love. If this generation sees genuine love in you, love for each other and love for the world and love for them, they will listen. What they're searching for most deeply is not a vibe or a cool aesthetic, not even a perfectly planned program. They want to know that they are seen, valued, and cared for. In fact, study after study shows that Gen Z is the loneliest generation on record. They report the highest rates of anxiety and depression of any generation before them. Nearly 40% of them have said that they are actively struggling with mental health issues. So this is a generation craving for connection. They're aching for someone to notice them, pursue them, love them well. And as the church, we have a sacred opportunity to love people in such a compelling, consistent, Christ-like way that they can't help but feel drawn to the hope that we carry. And so how do we reach the next generation? We love them. We take an interest in their lives. We get curious. We ask good questions. Because almost everyone enjoys being known. Right? We show love in practical ways. Hospitality. Invite them to a meal. Remember cool things about them. Know their names. Open up your home. Be intentional about talking to them. Notice new faces. Start friendly conversations. Create a space where they feel safe, welcomed, and loved. How, in short, love them. Right? Love won't guarantee that people will never walk away from the church, but it will make walking away a lot harder. Love won't guarantee that a non-Christian will come to Christ, but it will make the invitation far more compelling. Because here's the truth. Shane Pruitt says it this way. He says, this generation will always feel like something is missing until they realize that someone is missing. And that someone is Jesus Christ. They're looking for hope. They're looking for love. And this is the perfect moment for the church to stand and say, we know what you're searching for. We know what you're looking for. We know you're looking for hope. We know you're looking for love. And hope has a name. Love has a name. His name is Jesus. Win them with love. So right now what I want us to do is to consider a couple of questions. If you're watching this by yourself, maybe you can pause the video and write these down or consider them on your own. If you're watching with the group, maybe you guys can pause the video and discuss it with each other. So win them with love. The second thing we do, capture them with passion. Paul writes in Romans 12:11, do not lack diligence and zeal. Be fervent in the Spirit, serve the Lord. Increasingly, the newer generations won't give Christianity a second thought if it looks lifeless, boring, or uninspiring. If faith appears dull or disconnected from real life, they simply move on. The next generation, we know, wants their lives to matter. They want purpose. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. In fact, research shows that 80% of Generation Z says that living a fulfilling, meaningful life is extremely important to them. They're not content to drift. They want direction. This generation is not good at sitting on the sidelines. They don't want to watch the world happen. They want to shape it. They're not afraid of risk, challenge, even dying young for noble purposes. But they're terrified of boredom, of wasting their lives on things that don't matter. They want to make a difference far more than they want to make a lot of money. They're wired for impact. They crave purpose. And when Christianity looks like a movement, and purpose and passion and mission, a movement worth giving your life to, they take notice. But when it looks safe, predictable, and disconnected from the world's needs, they walk away. This is a generation hungry for a faith that means something, that costs something, that calls them into something bigger. They're waiting to see if the church will show them that following Jesus is the most meaningful, purpose-filled, world-changing mission that they could ever be a part of. And so what should we do? Well, student leaders, the next generation is hungry for something real. They're drawn to passion and purpose, authenticity. And so let's harness that and point it toward the greatest cause in the world, the gospel of Jesus Christ. The truth is Generation Z desperately wants their lives to matter. They care deeply about making a difference. They'll give their energy to whatever feels meaningful and alive. But honestly, sometimes I wonder if the next generation feels lost because the generations before them slowly faded in their passion. If the church looks tired, quiet, lukewarm, young people won't lean in. They'll walk away. That's why discipling the next generation is more about getting the right information in their heads. It's more than about getting correct theology. It's more than about cool programs and great services, right? They need to see something in us. They need to witness a faith that is alive, burning, compelling. They need to see you follow Jesus with passion, whatever that looks like for you. Your students won't remember everything you teach them, but they will remember everything that they saw you get passionate about and genuinely live out. And they see us get passionate about so many things, sports or hobbies or career, maybe our parents. But do they see us get passionate about Jesus, about His church, about the gospel? Because they need to. And it's not just us as student leaders they're watching. They need to see everyone, from the oldest to the youngest, following the Lord with genuine joy and devotion. Young people want to see passion. They want to see us follow Christ like we actually mean it. They want to know, does this matter to you? Is this real to you? If the spiritual temperature of our churches stay lukewarm, we will lose the next generation. But if they walk into a community where God is clearly the all-consuming reality of our lives, they will be drawn to it. Our sincerity matters more than our style. We can have the most cutting-edge music, the highest production quality, but if our students look around and no one is sincerely worshiping, that communicates something far louder. Many of you have heard of Benjamin Franklin, probably all of you, but Benjamin Franklin wasn't a believer. Yet he often attended and listened to sermons from George Whitefield. When someone once asked him, said, "Why do you keep going? You don't believe a word that he says." And Franklin replied, "I know, but he does." He was captivated by sheer authenticity. As Kevin DeYoung writes in his book, if our faith is boring to us, it will be boring to them. If the gospel feels like old news to us, it will sound like dull news to them. We cannot pass along what we do not feel. Love for Jesus is more caught than taught. And if we want to see our students ignite in passion, we must be gripped by passion ourselves. So, pastor in the 1800s, and he said, "I'm not interested to know if you can set the river on fire. I want to know if I dropped you into the river, would it sizzle?" Leaders, let your life sizzle with love for Jesus, because the next generation is watching, and they will follow what sets your soul on fire. So just like before, we'll put some more questions on the screen for you guys to discuss and consider. The third thing we do is we hold them with holiness. In 2 Peter 1 verses 5 through 8, it says this, "For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with goodness, goodness with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with endurance, endurance with godliness, godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being useless or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." These verses are telling us that if we're going to grow in faith, and virtue, and knowledge, and self-control, and steadfastness, godliness, brotherly love, we will not be ineffective ministers for Christ. And so if there is ever a secret to effective ministry, these verses give it to us. Grow in God, and you will make a difference in the lives of those around you. And so if your student ministry isn't producing fruit, the problem might not be the students. It may be that nothing spiritually significant is happening in your own life. Far too much ministry today is undertaken without any real concern for holiness. We found that changing the way we do church is a lot easier than changing who we are. And so too often we try to get attention by looking like everyone else, blending in with the culture, rather than standing out through a life transformed by Jesus. But today's young people do not want a culture of Christianity that fits in with the rest of the world. And they're searching for an observable Christianity, a faith that changes lives, transforms communities, makes a real impact. Maybe we would make more progress in reaching the next generation if we were making more progress in holiness ourselves. You know, we often hear warnings about how dangerous college can be for Christian teens and how many of them check out of the church once they get there. But research shows that most students who check out of their faith do so in high school, not college. It's not the liberal professors or the challenging coursework driving them away. It's our hard hearts, our stale witness, and our compromised faith that open the door for them to leave. One of our biggest challenges is that we have not consistently modeled Christian faith in the home, nor have we effectively connected youth with mature, godly adults in the church. If we want to disciple the next generation, we must grow ourselves, live lives worth following, and provide students with mentors and examples that truly reflect Christ. In the book Faith for Exiles, David Kinnaman concludes this about those with resilient faith. He says, almost without exception, these young people who are grown in their faith as adults were teenagers who fit into one or two categories. Either one, they came from families where Christian growth was modeled in at least one of their parents, or two, they developed such significant connections with adults within the church that it had become an extended family for them. Likewise, sociologist Christian Smith argues that a lot of research suggests that the most important social influence in shaping young people's religious lives is the religious life modeled and taught to them by their parents and other mentors. And so the take home from all of this is simple, but it's profound. The one indispensable requirement for producing mature, godly Christians is mature, godly Christians. And of course, even the best parents have wayward kids, and the most faithful mentors can't always reach every one of their students. But make no mistake, the promise of 2 Peter 1 remains true. If we are holy, we will be fruitful. And what the next generation needs now more than ever are personal connections with growing Christians. Studies show that spiritually healthy teenagers benefit from having at least 5 adult mentors outside of their parents. People pursuing holiness who can guide, encourage, and model a life fully surrendered to God. In our increasingly godless culture and with the rise of non-religion, the opportunity is clear. True Christian virtue will stand out. Genuine commitment, authentic love, godly character are noticeable. Students will notice when a community lives differently. And being a distinctive people is exactly what God has called us to do. There are many ways to draw a crowd, but there's only one way to be a truly spiritually fruitful minister. The fruit must be in you first. And if your walk matches your talk and if your faith costs you something, if being a Christian is more than just a cultural thing to do, students will listen. They will notice. They will be drawn. True spiritual fruit begins with a life fully surrendered to Christ. So now we're going to throw up a few more questions for you guys to discuss among each other. Fourthly, challenge them with truth. John 8:32, Jesus says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So we need to reach out to the next generation, but we need to do it without diluting our message. If someone doesn't understand the gospel, don't dumb it down, just raise them up. Despite this generation being more spiritually lost than previous ones, they are more curious about Jesus than any other generation before them. Right? Whether they accept it or not, they want to know what Christians actually believe. Young people won't tolerate feel-good cliches. They want the truth, straight up, unvarnished, unashamed. They may struggle with it. They may even resist it. But deep down, they want to know. So when it comes to reaching the next generation, bold, deep, biblical teaching is not the problem. It's part of the solution. Young people are not incapable of learning. For the most part, they simply haven't been taught. Again, as Shane Pruitt points out, if students can handle algebra and calculus and chemistry and physics, then they can handle deep biblical truths. But many have never been challenged to think deeply, to read a meaty book, or to articulate their faith in biblical and theological categories. We have expected almost nothing out of our young people, and that's what we get. Challenging the next generation begins with us. It begins with honest self-examination. Right? We must ask ourselves, hey, do I know the plot line of the Bible? Do I understand Christian theology? Do I read substantial Christian books? Do I grasp concepts like justification or original sin or propitiation or sanctification? Do I really understand the gospel? We cannot challenge others until we have first challenged ourselves. So think more deeply about your faith. DeYoung writes in his book, "You've heard it said that Christianity in America is a mile wide and an inch deep." Today it seems like it's more a half mile wide because cultural Christianity is fading. Influence is not as pervasive as it once was. He says, I'm convinced that if Christianity is ever going to be a mile wide again, it must first be a mile deep. Shallow Christianity will not last in this generation, and it will not grow. The church in the 21st century must go big on truth or go home. So y'all discuss these next few questions. Lastly, number 5, amaze them with God. Luke 5, verse 26 says this, Then everyone was astounded, and they were giving glory to God, and they were filled with awe, and said, We have seen incredible things today. People don't always realize it, but we live trivial lives. Right? We chase the next dopamine hit, glued to our phones, playing mind-numbing games, scrolling endlessly. And most people don't even know what they're missing. They don't even know what they really need is a big picture of God. If you remember in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, John writes to 7 different churches. And each of those churches have their own strengths and weaknesses. And he challenges them, he corrects them. But have you noticed what he does right after those chapters? In Revelation 4 and 5, John gives us a vision of the one who sits on the throne. We see 24 elders, 4 living creatures, 7 spirits, flashes of lightning, thunder, an incredible scene. And why does he do that? Because what these churches needed most was a vision of God. They needed to see the big picture, the greatness of the one who reigns and the Lamb who was slain. And that's what we lack today. More substantial, more lasting, more influential than your pain, your fear, your temptations, your clothes, your clever games, your funny clips online, or the latest tech gadget is God. What matters now and for eternity is the unceasing worship of Him who sits on the throne. So as you try to reach the next generation, you can impress them with your cleverness, your intellect, your humor, your looks, or you can amaze them with God. Right, there are a lot of things that I need in my life. Food, water, shelter, exercise, healthy eating. But my greatest need and yours is to know God, love God, delight in God, and make much of God. If we want to reach the next generation for Christ, the way to do it is simple. Give them more of God. The generation after Joshua fell away from God, not because they lacked information or proper understanding. They fell away because they failed to know God. All right, these are the last questions we'll throw up for this session, but go ahead and discuss those with your groups or consider them by yourself. And so the question I asked was, will you reach the next generation? And Judges 2 shows us that the next generation in Israel fell away. But before that, in Judges 1, it shows us some factors that made Judges 2 a reality. Right, there are things Israel did in Judges 1 that affected them losing the next generation. So what were those? Right, what stands in the way of reaching the next generation? There are probably a lot of answers to that, but I want to give you 4 right now as we close our time together from Judges chapter 1. Look with me in verse 1. The first truth, the first thing that stands our way is passivity. Verse 1. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, who will be the first to fight for us against the Canaanites? So if you remember, before Joshua, Moses was the great leader God used to bring Israel out of Egypt. For a time, Israel had 2 incredible leaders, Moses and then Joshua. But now we come to the book of Judges. And Israel is left without a leader. There's a leadership vacuum. And someone needed to step up. And I imagine everyone is looking around and they're asking, like, who will do it? Who will be the guy that leads us? And so here's the challenge for you as a student leader. Will you step up or will you stand on the sidelines? Too many of us are passive. We're waiting for someone else to make the first move. We're waiting for someone else to take responsibility. We're waiting for the perfect moment. But it's time to lay down those excuses and step forward and lead. Even if no one follows you at first, God can use your faithfulness to start a movement. Remember, the next generation is watching, and if you won't step up, who will? Student leaders, don't sit back. Lead boldly. The second thing we see is a lack of community. Look with me in verse 3. It says this, Judah said to his brother Simeon, "Come with me to my allotted territory and let's fight against the Canaanites. I will also go with you to your allotted territory." And so Simeon went with him. God calls the tribe of Judah to lead the fight against the Canaanites. And the first thing that Judah does is to enlist help. They asked the tribe of Simeon to join them in battle. By partnering with another tribe, the work became much easier. And this partnership illustrates how God designed his people to function as a body, with each parts helping each other out. And when the tribes worked together, they defeated the Canaanites. In the same way, seeking the Lord, obeying his guidance, working together as a body always produces great results. God has designed the church so that unity, support, and mutual accountability are possible. Worshiping together, studying together, holding each other to holiness together is essential. And the key word in that is together. As student leaders, we must focus on integrating the next generation into the church, not siloing them into a separate student ministry. Our churches must be intergenerational, giving students opportunities to connect with adults who live out the truths of the gospel. In my ministry, I don't want our students to feel separated all the time. A community of believers is essential for spiritual growth. And so when students make meaningful relational connections within the congregation, they are far more likely to value church as adults. The third obstacle is prayerlessness. Look with me in verse 12. It says, Caleb said, "Whoever attacks and captures the Kerith Sefer, I will give my daughter Akash to him as his wife." And so Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's youngest brother, captured it, and Caleb gave his daughter Akash to him as his wife. When she arrived, she persuaded Othniel to ask her friend for a field. And she got off her donkey, and Caleb asked her, "What do you want?" And she answered him, "Give me a blessing, since you have given me the land of Negev, give me springs also." And so Caleb gave her both the upper and the lower springs. So we're introduced here to a man named Othniel, who's giving Caleb's daughter, Aksa, as a reward for military victory. But notice what happens next. Aksa boldly asks her father for land. And not only does her dad, Caleb, give her what she asked for, he gives her more. And so here we see a powerful example of bold, confident prayer. She knew exactly who to ask, her dad, and she asked with boldness and courage. And she received more than she dared hope. And so the lesson is clear. When you pray, you're asking your Father in heaven. And Scripture tells us that He's a good Father. He desires to give us good gifts. Are you praying for your students? We must pray for our students. We must pray big prayers for our students. Right? Too often, our prayers lack boldness. We're timid in our request. And sometimes we don't even pray for our students. We just get busy. But we need prayers that are courageous, authentic, and focused, persistent. The only way we'll reach the next generation is through prayer. And so ask yourself, when was the last time you prayed for the students in your ministry? When was the last time you truly fasted for them to know the Lord? God is calling us to pray with faith and boldness and persistence, not for small things, but for kingdom-sized impact. And then the last obstacle is poor excuses. In verse 19, it says this, "The Lord was with Judah and enabled them to take possession of the hill country. But they could not drive out the people who were living in the plain because those people had iron chariots." Judah could not defeat the nations with the latest military technology, chariots of iron. But the problem wasn't the weapons. It was Judah's lack of trust in God. You see, when God's people trusted Him, chariots were no problem. Judah had the ability to defeat these enemies, yet they used chariots as an excuse not to fully follow God. What excuses are you given? Specifically, what excuses are you given for not giving your all to reach the next generation? Maybe it's too hard. I'm not capable. Our church is just too small. Nobody else is doing it. I can't relate to them, or I'm not good enough. The truth is that the Israelites had the power and the ability. And many of your excuses as well aren't because you can't, but that you won't. So now let me ask you to do this. Think of someone in the next generation that you love. It could be a child or a grandchild, a neighbor, a friend. What would you do to reach that person with the gospel? What would you give up if it meant that person would embrace Christ? How far would you go if it meant your family member would follow Jesus? Chances are there wouldn't be an excuse strong enough to stop you. Student leaders, we have the same mindset toward everyone in our ministries. No excuses, full trust in God, bold action, risk it all. I want to end our time together by sharing Psalm 78, verses 4 through 7. Read these with me. We will not hide them from their children, but will tell a future generation the praiseworthy acts of the Lord, His might, and the wondrous works He has performed. He established a testimony in Jacob and set up a law in Israel, which He commanded our ancestors to teach their children so that a future generation, children yet to be born, might know. They were to rise and tell their children so that they might put up their confidence in God and not forget God's works, but keep His commands. May it not be said of us that we were the last generation that lived for the greatness of God.